So at work, I spend a lot of time in our support channel watching the conversations that happen, trying to find inspiration for things I might be able to build at InVision. And the other day, someone asked a question about being able to generate PowerPoint documents from an InVision prototype. And I had never done this before. In fact, I haven't even used PowerPoint in years. So I did a little Google searching, and it turns out that the Apache POI library can be used to generate PowerPoint or PPT documents. Years ago, I used to use POI to generate Excel documents, and I didn't realize that POI was much more robust. Apparently, it can work with a number of Microsoft documents. So as a fun proof of concept, I wanted to see if I could take JSON data that represents the kind of data you'd find in an InVision prototype, screens and hotspots, each with dimensions and target screens that link to other screens within the particular prototype, and then use the Apache POI library to generate an interactive PowerPoint document based on an InVision prototype. So this took a lot of trial and error because I've never dealt with these aspects of POI before. So let's just walk through. So to do this, just as with a PDF, a PowerPoint document doesn't have different screen sizes, different slide sizes. All of the slides within a PowerPoint have to be the same size. So essentially, I have to go through the list of screens and find the max dimensions, and then set the PowerPoint to be those dimensions in order to accommodate the largest of the screens. In this particular demo, all of the screens are the same size, so it doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to add some padding or margin on each slide, just so that we're not bumping up against the edges of the screen. And you can see, so 30 and 70 are going to show up in the code below, and that's just kind of the absolute coordinates of the things that I'm putting on the slide. So the first thing I'm going to do is create that slideshow, set it to the max height and max width based on the screens plus the margins. And then what we end up having to do is two passes in order to create the PowerPoints. It turns out when you create a hyperlink, so if I want to link from one screen to another, I have to give it a slide reference, right? When I did the PDF, I just had to give it an HTML anchor, but in this case, I have to give it a slide reference. So I have to do one pass to actually create the slides, and then a second pass to create the hyperlinks or the hotspots that link to a particular slide. So pass one is to create the slides, and as part of that, we're going to create a mapping from the screen IDs to the slides. So we're going to create a title layout, and that just has a single title, which will then add the image below it. And you can see here, when I create the slide for this particular screen, I'm also mapping the screen ID to the slide instance. So then we can then, on the second pass, use this screen to slide map to tell the hotspot or the hyperlink which slide it is linking to. This is just some sort of low-level formatting stuff, how we want to set the text, the font size, the alignment. The text gets laid out using these anchors. The anchor is basically just a point in space within the slide. So you can see here I'm using that 30 pixel. I can't tell if it's pixels or points. The document's a little ambiguous. Or the document says points, but in practicality it seems to be pixels. I don't know, who knows. So we're doing that 30 pixel margin. And then we add the particular file, the prototype screen, to the slideshow. So you add the images to the slideshow separately from embedding them in a particular slide, and I assume that's so that you can reuse images across multiple slides. So you can see here we're adding it as a PNG. I know that all of my images are PNGs, so I'm just hard coding it. You'd have to obviously do something a little bit more dynamic in a real world scenario. That gives me the picture data. I'm then using the picture data to create a picture within the slide, and just as with the title of the slide, I also have to set it within the coordinate space of the slide using the set anchor. And again, you're seeing this 30 and 70, that's for the margins and offsets of the screen. But then you can see I'm actually just using the dimensions of the screen, which is why I think these values are all in pixels, not in points, because I have pixels in our database. So that's pass one. So that has set up the screen, the slides based on the screens, and again, populated this screen to slide map. So pass two, we're going to go back over the screens, and for each screen we're going to go over all of the hotspots. And now when we create those hyperlinks, we can map the screen IDs for the hotspot to the slides within the first pass. So you can see here, first I'm going to get the slide that I'm actually on. So this is the slide representing this screen, is going to be the screen ID. And then the target slide is going to be the hotspots target screen ID coming through that screen to slide map. Now all I have to do is create my auto shape, which I'm going to use a rounded rectangle. The fill color is going to be a mostly transparent blue. The line color is going to be a much more solid blue. And then again, we're laying it out in 2D space on the slide. Again, you're seeing 30 and 70 here. That's adding that margins and paddings to the slide coordinate space. And then you can see I'm telling this hotspot link to the slide, and this is again where that slide screen to slide mapping comes into place. Those are our two passes. Then we simply write it to an output stream and we're good to go. So now when we generate this, we can jump over to the browser and generate it super fast. And if we load that in PowerPoint, you can see what we have is here are my 5 screens. And you can see that I have all of the blue rectangles. Those are my hotspots. I can't really play this because it'll open up much larger than the place I'm recording. But what you can see is when I click here, this goes to slide 1. This is going to slide 2, slide 3, slide 4, slide 5. And then each one of these goes to the next slide. So 4 to 5. If we're on slide 2, you can see we go from 2 to 3. So it works pretty well. I have an animated GIF in the blog post. You can see it in action. I don't know how you would deal with screens that are actually larger than the slides because I don't see a way to actually scroll within a PowerPoint. Again, I don't really have any experience with PowerPoints, but this was just like a really fun proof of concept, fun experimentation, and it's really awesome to know that the POI, the Apache POI library, actually does a lot more than just Excel documents, which is what I originally had thought it was for. So I don't know, just fun, and really love Lucee CFML. I love the fact one thing that we're doing here, which was not necessarily obvious, was that all of my Java classes are getting created through this Java new UDF that I have at the bottom. So here are all of my Apache POI libraries, and if we jump down to my Java new, what you can see is that I'm looking at the class name that's passed in, and when it starts with Apache POI, I'm using the alternate syntax or the alternate signature for create object that takes type Java, the class name, and then here's my array of jar files, or points to paths for jar files. So that's just really awesome. You can use the create object function in Lucee to dynamically load jar files, which is just so cool. So cool. Really loving Lucee these days. CFML for the win. That's all I have to say.